Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for tuning in. John Kelly, profiler here, and welcome. And today, our show is going to be the mystery of Rachel Morin's killer. Who the hell is Rachel Morin's killer, right? So we're going to deep dive into that mystery. We'd like you to join us. We're very lucky today to have Dustin Ranck on. As you know, Dustin has done a number of shows with us, really knows his stuff. He's a licensed private investigator, just really top shelf. And, Dustin, we welcome you as always. Also, I want to send our condolences from all of us out to the families and friends of not only Rachel Morin, but the other victims as well. If you guys have noticed or have kept track, we've got a lot of women, a number of women getting killed on trails. Okay. And what we're looking at is we're looking at Rachel Morin. We're looking at Laken Riley. We're looking at Honoree Fleming. And we're looking at Eliza Fletcher. And we've got Eliza Fletcher in Memphis. We've got Honoree Fleming up in Vermont. We've got Laken Riley in Georgia. And I believe that's Macon, Georgia. And of course, we have Rachel, who was savagely murdered in Maryland. So, to all the families and friends of all those victims, these poor women, and there's a lot more that I'm not thinking of right now, we wish to, send our extreme sympathetic condolences to all the families and friends of those victims. At this point, too, I'd like to share my book and thank you for all your purchases. I can't thank you enough. Thanks for all your feedback. Thanks for all your comments. We truly, truly appreciate it. Discovering Lazarus, the good, bad, the ugly of John Kelly Profiler, how I kicked a really horrific cocaine addiction, how I became a counselor, a psychotherapist, and eventually a profiler. Thank you all so much and have a great day. Can't thank you enough. The other thing I want to talk about, and something Dustin will be involved with as well, is we're going to put an addictions piece together. Please let us know the interest you have in a show on addictions. It's going to be from soup to nuts. We are very, very, extremely knowledgeable when it comes to addiction. We're both recovering, Dustin and I. And thank God we've been able to, to keep our recovery going one day at a time. And we've been able to accomplish along with our recovery process. So please let us know how interested you are. We want to share what we have with you, and it's not going to be just war stories. This is not war stories. We may have some guests on that'll be talking about war stories, what it was like for them, new people that are in new recovery, early recovery. But we're going to give you the nuts, the bolts, the fundamentals of addictive illness. It's a disease, and that's what it's all about. And we're gonna dive into that in an extreme way. Probably you're going to get information you never heard of before, to be honest with you. Also, when we're looking at, this piece we're doing today, I have to bring out a disclaimer. Everybody's innocent until proven guilty in court of law. Although we have really nobody we're naming, but I've got to put that out there anyway, just in case. We got to always have that disclaimer out in front. No question about it, because that's the way the system works, right? I'm looking at the crime scene in the tunnel. And Dustin, again, welcome. Most important thing, I think the guy left through the back of the tunnel, not through the front of the tunnel. What do you think about that? And before I jump in there, I have to give credit to the interview room. They've got a great show out there. It's lengthy, but it's really interesting and good. And they do a lot on the tunnel. They do a video on the trail. There's a really good quality video they've done on the whole crime scene and the trail itself leading up to the crime scene in the tunnels. Okay, way to go, interview room. All right. So Dustin, what do you think about the tunnels and the exit and everything else?
Yeah. John, I'll start off. Yeah, thanks again for having me. It's always a pleasure, and
Oh,
thanks
our pleasure.
as well. So yeah, that tunnel thing it's pretty interesting, right? When I'm not a native of Maryland, obviously, but when you look at how that trail system goes together and where the tunnels, bisect the highways, there's actually two places that they do. You've got Rachel Morin parking her car at one end of this trail to go out for a walk, go for a run, whatever she's doing. But then if you follow that trail around and you bypass those tunnels, they kind of the path semi sort of parallels there. They wind up in the same spot essentially once you get past the highways. But it makes a lot of sense to me that in this the interview room guys kind of brought this up too. It makes a lot of sense that this guy wouldn't be doing the out and back, because he's got double visibility at that point. So, if he's parking down at that kind of southwestern end of the trail, uh, he's got an opportunity to kind of do his thing, take his time, walk out there, dip into the tunnel, and just wait. That tunnel system is not on the trail, but I mean, if you're in the tunnel, like you've got some visibility there at the very least. It's not too far away from the paved pathway. So you've got some additional cover aside from just the tunnel itself. In the summertime you're going to have much more foliage than you would say this time of year. But you've got the noise too, which could be a really big deal. I mean, you've got this highway running directly over where that crime scene was
Mm,
located, and I can't help but think that there is a little bit of a tactical aspect to that, whether it was, yeah, it could have been on the fly, but it kind of goes back to LA, right? Like, now, how does a guy just commit a crime in LA and just randomly wind up in Maryland, and we've talked about this going way back, and I've heard it mentioned a time or two elsewhere, but the guy's probably got some sort of connection working in Maryland. So, looking at that tunnel and the geography, it's got a real tactical approach because, man, you can just be blending in with the crowd. I mean, you might even be interacting with people like at the dog park. You go on, you do your run, dip in the tunnel, abduct somebody, drag them in there. There's so much noise, if anybody, and, like a lot of people do, but if you have an apartment or a house next to a highway, the ambient noise is pretty intense. And if you're right under it, I mean, it's loud enough that you kind of have to shout to if you were going to communicate. So if you had intentions of, rape or murder or, assault of any kind, that noise is going to be a pretty big deal in terms of covering the sound because those assaults don't happen in a vacuum, obviously. And we know Rachel was really strong. She was incredibly physically fit. So I mean, she had to have been putting up a fight. There's just no way in my mind that I could picture a girl like that going down easily, you know.
mhm.
So, that tunnel was really interesting because it's, I mean, John, you think about it, like, some guy going to come from LA and just happen upon that? Probably not. I mean, sure, if we know this guy at least appears physically fit, if he's hitting the gym or he's a runner, he's a hiker, whatever, yeah, he could grab a map like a million people do, but what the hell's he doing in Bel Air, Maryland on that track assaulting a woman? Eventually, that murder was pretty gruesome, as you said. So that tunnel just had a real, tactical approach in my mind, if as opposed to something random, that was just some blitzkrieg attack out of the bushes on the trail, man. I mean, no, he swooped her up, dashed her away, got her off the trail, got her into a place that he could do whatever he wanted with her. Um, and nobody's going to know it, can't see it, can't hear it. So the fact that that would just be a random location and he got that lucky, could it happen? Yeah, but I think there's a high probability that that was not an accident.
No, and when you look at it, you bring up the noise factor. He wants to make sure nobody hears the screams. Okay,
You bet. Oh.
So where you have that traffic going by back and forth or whatever, I don't know if she even got to scream, but obviously this guy was prepared with a rock or something like that to whack her, knock her out. He's concerned about somebody hearing her screams. Now, because the foliage and everything is in bloom and everything's, pretty dense out there with the various bushes and trees and everything, he's not worried about being seen. But
Mm.
again, he takes the noise aspect of it, screams, if you will, and definitely has that top of mind. So he wants to silence her as quickly as possible so no one can hear, and then he can bring her to the second location. Okay. And folks, the only advice I can ever give you on anything like that, if you're ever in a position, never go to the second location, no matter what these guys say to you, because they're all full of bullshit and not gonna, just do what I tell you and I won't hurt you. I mean, yeah, really, right? But anyway, the bottom line is when you're looking at these guys and from my experience in history and talking to them in the different cases we've been involved with, as soon as they kill somebody, okay, I mean they're all hyped up, they're in a trance, whatever you want to call it. They're euphoric, they're disassociating, however you want to look at whatever high they're enjoying as they're taking power control and having sexual dominance over their victim. You have to understand that these guys, as soon as that person is dead, as soon as they kill that person, unless they're a necrophiliac, you know what I mean? Like Gary Ridgway, Green River, and he's going to haul the person away to, even a third location where he's going to hide the body so he can return, to have sex with a dead victim. I mean, but if they're not a necrophiliac, as soon as they kill that person, they come out of that trance pretty quickly, from what I understand, because they're engulfed with fear. I mean, they are afraid. They are overwhelmed with fear, and rightfully so, because that's when they're the most vulnerable. And they know this because they're there wherever that second location is that they took the person, in this case, the tunnel with Rachel Morin, and they've got a dead body with them, right? Because they killed this girl. He killed this girl, so he's got to get out of Dodge. All right. So I'm thinking, he wants to get out of Dodge with, the least amount of interaction with other people that he can have. Because the more space he can put between himself and Rachel, is the more possibility of a clean getaway going, and he's not going to have people seeing him or testifying against him later on. So he just wants to get out of Dodge as fast as he can after the kill. He's overwhelmed with fear. He's looking to exit stage left real quick. Okay. So now, which way would he go? I believe he went out the back door. So he went out the back door. He went into that area you were talking about when he went out the back of that tunnel. Okay. Now, when you look at going out the back of that tunnel, you ask yourself, how the heck did this guy ever find this place, as you brought out in the beginning? How did he scope this place out? How did he look at the ins, the outs? How did he scope out his ambush attack? How did he scope out, keeping it close enough to the second location that he could overpower her and get her in there, even if he used a weapon or something else to coax her, and some bullshit about, I'm not going to hurt you, just do what I tell you, that kind of thing, until she saw that tunnel, and then, definitely, I think you're lying, bro, and let's get it on here, so she started fighting. But the problem I have is how he knew, and you brought this up in the beginning, how he knew the area even existed. How did he know the area even existed? So just for a second, one of the theories that I've been bouncing around in my head, and we want the audience's feedback on all this. Okay, I want to know what the audience thinks, and I know you do too. Okay, Dustin. But he does this job in LA. Okay. Now he blew that. He left his hat there. Some people say he left beer there. Some people say he left a bottle of something there. Okay. That's how they got his DNA, from the hat, from the bottle, whatever. I don't know. The cops only know, right? But anyway, he knows he's been seen. Most of these guys are extremely visual. So now this guy has to book, right? They know what he looks like. He knows these people in the house know that let him out that door. They know what he looks like. And therefore, they ended up giving a description to a sketch artist. So now this guy has to book. Well, lots of times, where do people run for safety? Even if it's on a subconscious or unconscious level, lots of times they run to a place that they feel very comfortable with, a place that's very safe. And lots of times it's around their home. Lots of times it's around a place that they're so familiar with because they grew up there, right? Now, getting back to the tunnels, really, a lot of people didn't even know these tunnels were there, that walked that path or jogged that path. But you know who knew? The kids, the teenagers. They partied there, they drank there, they did their spray painting there, their art there. You know? So that says to me, well, the kids knew. A lot of other people didn't know that walked the trail, ran the trail. I wonder if this guy at some point, this was a home of origin for him, a place of origin where he started out, and like the kids, when he was younger, he found these tunnels. You know, it wouldn't surprise me. Wouldn't surprise me at all. So it's something I just want to throw out there, but I want to hear back from our audience. That's what's most important. The other thing that you brought up again earlier on, I want you to talk about it now. We're talking about a Michael Jordan hat. Well, Michael Jordan represented the Chicago Bulls. If you look at the colors of the Chicago Bulls, I think I sent it over to you. Some gang members or some gangs really relish those colors, I guess is the word, but please you describe it. I know I saw, Bloods and some other gangs come up on the radar that really, are into the Chicago Bulls, or the colors of the Chicago Bulls, I want to say, and I think it's also interesting for us to bring up that early in the investigation, the detectives were sent to Chicago from Maryland to scope out a tip. I mean, that's in it's in the press. But how important, are these hats and colors? I mean, no tats. We don't see any tats on this guy
Right.
that we can see. But he's in that area. He's in a gang area with colors right on that hat. And it's not like he's 17, 18 years old. He's older than that. So, I mean, what's your take on that? I'm just throwing this out there.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct, John. Like everything in outlaw culture, whether it's gangs or whatever it is, it's all, and we talked about this on other cases too, like that symbolism, and telling that story, it's a visual reminder to other people that, hey man, I'm affiliated, right? You've got red, blue, whatever it is, historically in LA, obviously, through the late 60s coming into the 80s when we saw like a really huge spike and gang population and gang activity. Yeah, it was Bloods and Crips, red and blue. And I mean, guys in those neighborhoods, I mean, that was live and die by those colors. They take them extremely seriously. That's representing their neighborhood. It's representing their people. It's representing their set. I mean, that symbolism is extremely, extremely important. one of the things that I found interesting about that guy, now, you got to remember too, in LA, you got a lot of gangs and these neighborhoods, sometimes just butt up against each other. I mean, you be in one part of town and you literally cross the street and you are an unfriendly territory. So let's say you're wearing, whatever color it is, and you cross the street into another territory that is, you got a rivalry with that gang that represents those colors. You're in a world of trouble. At the very least, most likely, if they have the opportunity, they're going to kill you. I mean, the gang stuff is super, super ruthless. So it's not unusual that you see, especially street gangs, and I'm not calling anybody out for this, but in terms of the symbolism, they'll pick a sports team. A lot of time it represents the town or the city that they're from, but mostly it usually has to do with the colors, or
Brings
there's
the
an
colors to it.
emblem or something in that organization. Like, let's just use the NBA Chicago Bulls, for example. That bull, we've got a Hispanic guy wearing a red hat, which is completely fine. But, if we're in Blood's territory down in LA, like, and we've talked about this a bunch, John, about what a high risk maneuver that assault in LA was, just on its own. I mean, massively high risk. But now if this guy's roaming around in, a rival gang's territory wearing the wrong colors, man, that takes the risk up exponentially higher. I don't care what time of day it is, because you got guys on the street 24/7 in those neighborhoods, and man, you do not want to, you don't want to get caught slipping and making the wrong kinds of mistakes. Even as a civilian, I've been approached a bunch of times, especially when I was working down there, and I might be wearing something that these guys would come up because they recognize, one, obviously, not from the area, but, like, hey, man, who are you representing, or, what's your set, whatever. And you just say, look, man, I am a civilian, I'm here on business. And most of the time that's pretty cool. Most of the time those guys will give you a pass if you'll communicate with them. But, just roaming around and they're committing crimes on their territory, wearing the wrong colors, that's a big deal. So a lot of these guys will co-op, they'll adopt the colors of a team. Because you think about it, John, when you go back to the 80s, especially in the 90s, when I was working down there a bunch, I mean, you can still spot a gang member a mile away, no doubt. But, back then, before it was mostly the tattoos, the jailhouse tattoos, and what those meant and what those images were. It was the graffiti tags on the wall claiming the territory. I mean, they definitely had a particular style of dress. But, you think about it, man. I mean, if you're just you think about how huge sports teams are in our culture right here, and not just in America, but worldwide. Soccer, football, basketball, whatever it is, like, how much more low profile is it than just, some guy wearing a jersey from his favorite team. But, if we distill that back a little bit, man, I mean, that if he's in the right area, he's got the right connection, got the right tattoos, especially, that's a real big visual clue to other gangs that, hey, man, this is my set, because everybody's going to know what that red or blue or purple and gold, or black and white, whatever it is, they're going to know. The street trade has a line on that for sure. So, I could see somebody, it could be a way for somebody to move around with a little bit more incognito in terms of blending in with civilian society or mainstream society. But gangs are going to know. I mean, I don't care what goes on. Like, when you are in a gang territory and a color moves through there that you don't recognize, man, I mean, those dudes are on it super fast. If they don't see it themselves, they've got people calling it in. It's a big deal. Those territories are a big deal. So, I'm thinking back to that LA thing and what high risk it is, and then we move on to Maryland, right? Well, what a better way for a clean cut, athletic build guy to blend in. He's on a jogging track, maybe, jogging path. Maybe he's got his kicks on. He's got his, whatever team wearing. He might be wearing a jersey or a tank, like an NBA tank or something. And he's jogging. He's walking up and down the path. It's a nice summer day. Man, nobody's going to pay that guy a bit of mind. He looks like any other young person that loves sports, out doing it. I know in my neighborhood, in my area of the world, you see that all the time. I mean, you don't even think twice about it. Now, if you're in a gang neighborhood, yeah, or if you know what you're looking for, like I said, in terms of, it could be a subtle cue, the way that they hold themselves, or, their tattoos, obviously, again, especially. But man, in Maryland, that guy could roll out there, if there was, throw his sports gear on, man, he'd be moving around, because that East Coast area is just like the West Coast. Man, you go, everybody's wearing a jersey, they're wearing a cap representing their team. Whatever, that dude's just going to blend right in. Nobody's going to pay him any mind at all. So it is a really interesting thing, though, to that he left that cap there, and that it is the Chicago Bulls. Like we're talking here, John, about this guy having some sort of frame of reference about those tunnels, maybe being a kid or whatever it is. Um, but maybe, and the cops, and I think that angle on Chicago, at least as far as I knew, I heard about that way before that hat,
Yeah,
information
for
came
sure.
out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we're getting tips to Chicago, that's, those cops in LA, especially, or anybody that's working a gang task force, I mean, they're going to clue in it. Those guys are super smart. They're super street savvy. And I really give them a lot of credit for rolling with that tip early on, because they'd be crazy not to. But it just shows you the level of detail that law enforcement also was looking at this case, and the minutia of it. Because we see with a lot of these killers, man, they love that symbolism. And so for this guy to not have any, yeah, he might not, but chances are, especially if he's plugged into any kind of street trade at all, you better believe that's a big part of his life in one way or another.
Yeah, and the thing of it is the urge.
Yeah.
These guys, when they get that urge, I mean, it is just so overwhelming. It is so overpowering. It is so intoxicating, the urge to kill, to take and have sexual dominance, control, and power over a woman, and they just lose control. A lot of them do. I mean, now he's getting started. I don't see a lot of sophistication, but when they get hit with this urge, I mean, we talked about it early on, the loss of control, how impulsive, these guys can be when they get that kind of urge going, when they get hit with that. I mean, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because this guy cannot go on. I don't care if he's in this country, if he's up in Alaska. I don't care if he's in Mexico, wherever it is. If there's women there, this guy's going to get the urge again, and he's going to act out on it again. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. All right, so we gotta really stop this guy. You also brought up a good point too about possible Army military. Let's use the word military. Possible military service, certain amount in Maryland, definitely. Of military forts and different services there. I mean, that's also a possibility, because he looks pretty fit. Looks pretty fit, so you just wonder about that. Do you have any more to add to that?
Um, Not a terrible amount, but he is the right age, and somebody, and I didn't even think about the military angle early on until somebody mentioned it to me privately. Like, hey man, that's kind of a military style haircut. It's just not necessarily universal to the military, but it's high and tight, it's clean, and it got me thinking, you got this guy who, he's obviously, he's, the right age, he's physically fit, he could potentially have, a very tactical mindset around this event in Maryland, just because of the geography, obviously, but LA too, we talked about this a bunch, and that visual, that visual input. I mean, nobody in their right mind is just going to walk into a house in South Central LA. Now, some doped out fiend probably will, that's super desperate, but we can tell by the doorbell video. This guy, man, he's casual, man. He is not plussed by anything that just happened at all. And it started making me think about, where would a guy and there's a couple angles here, John. Where does a guy learn to be that cool under pressure? You know, from just my area of the world, yeah, you're going to learn that on the street big time, especially if you're in your 20s and you came up, in the street trade. I mean, my gosh, the way that some of these guys talk, and from talking to serial killers, the way that they talk about, these events that only like a regular person would just be like, whoa, 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 that's way too intense. I mean, they just talk about it like they're having coffee with just somebody, at Starbucks. I mean, you know, but something like the military or the street trade is going to give this guy an awful big edge on it, not his impulse control, but how he processes that stress. And you brought up a thing a long time ago about this case, John, about this guy and his impulsivity and about like that kind of addict mentality and that behavior. Because we both know, he's got this thing that goes south in LA, right? Well, man, I mean, that if he's in that house for whatever, for an assault or, sexual assault, whatever, and it does, or maybe he's there to, kill the occupants. We don't know 100%, but it doesn't look like he probably got what he was going after. So with that addict mentality in mind, and I know about this, but man, if you are on the hunt to feed that impulse, to feed that addiction, you're going to recycle it right back to the nearest place that you can get a hold of it. You're going to go score dope. If you go to a location and they don't have what you need, man, you're right on to the next one. And you turn into it turns into a mission to find it or to get that gratification. So, man, it would make a lot of sense to me that this guy, man, he gets kind of stonewall. He gets tripped up in LA. He's got this big, fantasy rolling through his mind with this high risk entry and assault this young woman. Doesn't go all the way that he needs it to. So, man, he maybe books at home to where he's got, some sort of ground, somewhere where he maybe not literal home, but maybe he's got relatives or friends, or he's got some connection somewhere that he's going to like get that need met. So I just can't help but think that, as I'm looking at maps and I'm going through the list of like, well, where in the world, if this guy is military, he's plugged into the street trade. Well, we know Maryland and LA both, LA especially, and now Baltimore too, certainly big city has a lot of street crime, but LA, man, I mean, you look at that stuff down there and it's, woof, it's just a wash of color when you start looking at the neighborhood maps of how many like active gang members that they know about, how many territories they know about is going on in such a huge area. And it's just astounding. So I don't know if this guy is part of the military, is part of the street trade, but I started kind of going through it. We've got gangs on both ends, but we've got a heavy military presence in both sides of the coasts as well, just kind of by default because they border it's just a good tactical place to have military reserves. But especially Maryland, I mean, you've got all kinds of historical military installations, recruiting centers, all kinds of stuff. And then you get out to LA and you've got naval bases, you've got all kinds of stuff there too. So as I'm going through that, I'm just simply, and I'm not calling anybody out in the military or anything like that. I'm just looking for any kind of overlap that might make sense to this guy's behavior, or what we know about it so far.
Yeah, the other thing too is he would probably walk around, I'm thinking being unassuming, okay, and just be there, and really not be a big talker, not talk a lot, not show a lot of emotion. Because the one quality I've seen, or the one hindrance I've seen with these guys, is the flat affect. I got to tell you, the first time I ever met with a serial killer, and I'll go all the way back just my first time out meeting with Henry Lee Lucas. When I met with him and I got a load of him and I started to feel him out, look at him, I thought to myself, are you alive? I mean, this guy was so flat. Okay, I mean, it was just like, duh, you know what I mean? I mean, this is how they are. I mean, you don't see a lot of emotion unless they need to somehow be charming as a lure, to bring you in. You know what I mean? It's like they're evil chameleons. As they are, they have this real flat affect, and you're not going to be looking at them to be your best friend anytime soon to socialize with them. But yet, if they want to get somebody, into their trap, all of a sudden, you're going to see this charming personality come out or whatever, and this big grin and smile and everything. But the bottom line is they're so flat and they have such a flat affect. I think it's like a low grade depression lots of times. I think that came from one place or another as they were growing up. And the stimulation of the forbidden, the stimulation of the sexual excitement and the forbidden. I mean, that just brings them from down here right up to the roof. Okay. I mean, that's like, the highest of highs for them, plus that whole God concept, they have the last say over life or death. But, it's that, killing to feel alive. I mean, it's quite an oxymoron, don't you think? I mean, killing to feel alive. So, I mean, it's pretty crazy. But that's what they do. That's what they do. So the stimulation, that they get on the hunt, and it just keeps, progressing, and peaking until the murder takes place. And then, like I said, when the murder takes place, boom, they come right back down to earth. They're filled with fear. They're extremely concerned. They're very vulnerable, and they're scared of getting arrested and getting caught. So they're booking. It's quick. They want to put as many miles as they can between them and that body as possible. So that gets to be a big part of it too. That the stimulation of the forbidden, and the other thing I want to ask you, because you're a great artist. I mean, we are looking at a picture, a sketch of a guy that knows he was seen in LA. Why would he not change his appearance? Now, if he's in the service, like, like you said, they want it tight. They want your hair cut back, and they want it short and tight. And they want you to look wholesome, and they're not really interested in a whole lot of facial hair in the military. They want you clean looking, right? So if he's in the military, he has to kind of keep that look, if you will. But I'm concerned about if he's not in the military, right? I mean, how's he going to change his look? Is he going to go with a mustache? He's going to go with a beard? He's going to let his hair grow out? I mean, he's not going to look like, I guarantee you today, that guy, if he's not in the military, has made some considerable changes, and he looks nowhere like that sketch too. He may be that stupid, that he's going to look the same as he did when he barged into that house. When he jumped in there and broke into that house. But the point I'm trying to make is, he's got to probably, plus being a visual person, he doesn't even have to be the sharpest knife in the drawer to realize he's got to look differently. Now, these people looked at him, they saw him, they have his hat, if he has any street credit at all, he knows the sketch is coming, right? So, I mean, I think we have to take that into consideration too, that he could look differently. What do you think about law enforcement putting out that picture of the sketch, but with different looks to it? Do you think that's a good possibility, a bad possibility, a good idea, bad idea? I mean, what do you think about that? Having his sketch, but showing how he could have put, add some facial hair, a mustache, let his hair grow longer, covered this ear that supposedly looks damaged. I mean, what's your 2 cents on that, Dustin?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, John, because you're right. I mean, unless this guy just cannot figure it out, of course he's going to change his look. And I think law enforcement's approaching this the right way because it's just still pretty new, right?
Right.
It's recent-ish. So I, I I wouldn't be surprised if we see some more sketches come down the pipeline a little bit. I think it makes a
Mhm.
lot of sense that they start with what they absolutely know. Because if this guy's got a partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is, I mean, they're going to know what he looks like. So they're going to try to target, that close to home base thing right out of the gate because they don't need to be tracking down every lead under the sun with every dude with a goatee and shaved head or long hair or whatever. They're going to start with what that guy looks like and try to hone in on somebody who's like, oh, hey, I know who that guy is. He's somebody I've had contact with or somebody I've had a relationship with, whatever, because it's gonna like really triangulate where they go next immediately. They're not going to have to sift through a bunch of stuff. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. And I think it would be a great idea. Like they let that marinate a little bit because I don't know what kind of feedback they're getting from it entirely, but you better believe they're getting some kind of feedback from it. I would certainly think that, they're getting some tips or at least places to look off of it. But yeah, I think we could absolutely see that change because and it's an important thing to remember. And we ran across this in the tattoo business all the time. People a lot of times will have ideas in their mind about whatever, but if they're not visual and they're not used to seeing things in their mind's eye or not used to seeing the translation from what's in their head to the paper
Mhm.
or the table, whatever it is, being able to put out a sketch, with those changes in mind, because, sure, I can visualize it because, it's not that big of a deal for me, but for somebody else, it might be. So I think we'll see something like that eventually, and it's going to all depend on how much feedback they're getting off that original sketch. But yeah, I think it would be a good idea. And I do think that we'll see it. At least I hope we'll see it, but we'll find out too. So
Well,
time will bear that out.
like you said, it's early in the game, so it seems like a long time to us, but it's really not that old, not that long. But we do know the clock's running, and every day we don't catch him is a day closer he is to killing another girl, killing
Sure.
another woman. Okay. I mean, this guy can't control himself. He's going to do that. Eventually, he's going to
Yeah.
kill another woman or girl. There's absolutely no question about it. Let me ask you, Dustin, how would you disguise yourself if you were him? What would you do to change your look and while you're getting out of Dodge?
Well, I mean,
And you're an artist. You're an artist
yeah.
and a good one.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, obviously, like the one thing that would be tricky for a guy like me is because I got a ton of tattoos and they're, highly visible. But you know what, John, as an artist, I also, know people in the film industry and I could get access to like really good base makeup. There's a lot of stuff I could do. The first place I'd probably go, and this would just be me because I'm a little higher visibility. I'd probably go somewhere cold where I could stay covered up a little bit more. I'd be in a place where, maybe a little more, I don't know, it seems counterintuitive, but a big city is actually easier to disappear in, than a rural one like where I live, because where I live, man, I mean, it doesn't matter where you go in my town. Everybody knows everybody. And it's not a teeny town either. I mean, it's not a metropolis, but I mean, you, it's hard to miss people that, going to the post office, going to the grocery store, getting gas. I mean, you have contact with a limited amount of people virtually every day. I mean, unless you just got a ton of money and all you do is hang out at home, but that's not me and it's not most people. So I could see this guy, I've had a lot of people mention to me like, oh man, well, if he's in a place like Maryland or LA, like, how does somebody not see him? Like, well, because it's super easy to disappear. You got to remember there's so many different factions of people. There's so many different like social groups and cultural groups. I mean, pick a poison and just start dressing that way. And man, you're just going to blend right in. You know, it's not like in a rural setting where you might have, you know, you kind of got, you know, more of a conservative environment where somebody wearing, you know, different types of clothes or growing their hair different is going to stand out a little bit more. You know what I mean? In a big city, man, it's kind of a free for all. You don't really have that kind of stuff to worry about. So this guy could be doing a lot of different things. I mean, the most obvious is going to be he's going to start growing facial hair because it's rapid. You know, it's not like growing your hair out. Now, this guy has had a year. I mean, what's it been? Yeah, it's coming up on a year here in about a week or so, week or two from LA. So he's had time to grow his hair out, but facial hair, man, I mean, boom, you give that for a guy that's in his 20s or 30s. That's a week, you know, 10 days at the very outside, but you know, you give it a year. I mean, this guy could be growing a full beard, but that's going to grow super fast. That's going to be his most obvious. That and his just manner of dress is going to be the first thing he tries to identify is what do I need to change up? Because that's what he can do right now. Now, how creative he gets beyond that is another story. We don't know that piece of it just yet, but you know, as this thing unfolds, will be interesting to see once this guy's caught what he has he been doing. But you can rest assured his dress and facial hair will be the first thing that he's going to address because he can. It's expedient. It, you know, happens so quickly. You know, and certainly with dress. I mean, heck, you go out and buy some different clothes, and boom, you know, you start blending in with a different crowd, and there you go.
Mhm, mhm. Well, that's interesting as well because you know, when you talk about the facial hair, you know, it doesn't take long,
Mm-mm.
you know, to grow that out. And again, he knows he's been seen. So that all that makes sense. Everything you just talked about makes a lot of sense, you know. And the other thing that I've been looking at is, you know, we know this was a sexual assault with Rachel Morin, okay? A horrible murderous sexual assault. And the other thing we know is that she had an Apple Watch on, and they're pretty expensive. This guy didn't take it. He didn't
Mm-hmm.
take it. Now, is he smart enough to think, well, I could be tracked if I take that watch?
Mm.
I don't know, maybe. Or maybe he doesn't need money. He doesn't need to sell a watch for money. So, you know, we know it's a fantasy driven sexual murder, but we don't know, you know, if there was any theft at all involved, you know. Usually these guys coming up have some kind of history of theft, usually B&Es or, you know, some kind of fraud somewhere. I mean, usually it's there, man. It's usually there somewhere before they really get up and running and get into the hunt and the stalking and the killing. So, I mean, I just wonder about this. You know, if he had, like I said, I don't think he's the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I don't think I don't know how dumb he is. I don't think he's any, you know, like he's not sharp, but how stupid he is another question. Where he just wanted out of Dodge so quickly, he didn't give the, you know, the Apple Watch a second thought or anything like that. Who knows if she had any money in a purse or anything like that? If he grabbed that, you know, people are burning purses with them or whatever, and not, you know, pouches. You know, he may have looked at that or grabbed something and a trophy. See, a
Mm.
trophy. You know, what would the trophy have been? Because these guys love trophies and something they can remember and relive the act through. So we just wonder what else he may have left with what he grabbed. They usually grab something to, you know, relive, you know, the whole situation, and that's from beginning to end, from scoping it out and, you know, seeing her, stalking her, you know, coveting her, abducting her, and assaulting her and killing her. I mean, they want to relive that over and over and over again. They can't get enough.
Mm-hmm.
can't get up. That fantasy, they live in that fantasy. And that's why they usually don't have really great jobs, because they're so addicted to the fantasy, like somebody's addicted to coke or heroin or something. They're always in that fantasy, so they'll just take any kind of job usually they can get in most cases. Usually a lower type, hands-on kind of job, usually very visual, very blue collar, hands-on, um, like some type of contractor, woodworker, um, some type of labor, maybe truck drivers a lot. We've seen many truck drivers, get arrested for serial murder, and that's a beautiful job for a person, if they're solitary, not being have to socialize, being around people, stuck in their truck all day, driving wherever, or a helper. This guy looks like he's in good shape, so I don't think he's afraid of manual labor. So it's some kind of manual labor, hands-on kind of thing. There's millions of them. We'd only be guessing. We are only guessing. So we're going to have to wait. We're going to have to wait and until this guy gets caught. Eventually, he won't be able to help himself, whether it's here or in another country. And I know I said another country or Alaska before. Believe me, folks, I do know Alaska is part of the United States. Okay, so that just was misspoken on my part. All right, miscue. The other thing is, he'll have to, have something to remember the women. So if he didn't take a trophy now, he will eventually take trophies, And talking about, remembering other women, I mean, we have to really tell women to be very careful out there on those trails. You know, I mean, the bottom line is we're talking about, and this is just recently off the top of my head, we're talking about Rachel, okay, being killed on the trail. We're talking about Laken Riley recently being killed by this illegal immigrant on a trail. We're talking about Honoree Fleming up in Vermont being murdered by someone we don't even have a clue who it is. Okay. She was 70 years old. I have a hard time believing that was a sexual assault. Maybe it was, but I'm thinking more, just some kind of spree killer or mentally ill, person, schizophrenic, paranoid schizophrenic, shot her in the head. And then we have Eliza Fletcher, a guy who was in prison, did a lot of time for sex abusing, sexual abuse, and abusing women. He did a lot of time. He raped a woman, and I think he did 11 years over as soon as he got it. And I'm not, completely certain, but I think around 11, did a lot of time. I know that. Gets out, and then he, attacks Eliza Fletcher in Memphis, and sexually assaults her and kills her. And he was away for so long. It's, again, doesn't matter how long they're away. You can't get rid of the craving if you're around your drug of choice. And with these guys, their drug of choice is the euphoria they get, having power, control, and sexual dominance over women, right? So that's what we have to take into consideration, But we have to really send out our condolences to friends and families of all the women that have been killed on the trails, and certainly we haven't forgot them, and we're looking where we can to get them justice. There's no question about it. No question about it. So we're up to feedback. We're up to feedback. We want to get feedback from our audience out there. I've got one note here. What do you think the motive was for killing Laken Riley? What do you guys think the motive was for killing young, beautiful Laken Riley? In Georgia. On the trail, the running trail in Georgia. Okay. because they have not come out and said, what the exact motive was. I really think this guy was heading for to abuse her sexually in some way, and I think this little girl started to kick his butt, started to fight him off real good, and that's when the guy hit her with something, and he's been charged with blunt force trauma, and that's how he killed her. But I think that was his motive all along. I mean, he's not there to believe that he's going to get a lot of money out of attacking a young girl like that, or out there running in the morning. Young runners or running runners at all usually are walkers, aren't carrying very much money, if any money, with them whatsoever. So we get, to all the women out there to go on the trails, be safe. Keep your eyes open, be aware of your surroundings. We live in a very dangerous world. And the bottom line is they know, okay, that the cameras are not on the trails. See, most of these guys are visual, so they're focused on who can see them when they're in the act. And they know the cameras are pretty much all throughout the city, all throughout the towns. People are carrying cameras. People are taking selfies. People are shooting cameras all the time, but they know that's not happening on the trails. When they're on the trails, nobody can see them. That's what they want. Okay, they don't want to be seen doing the act. So we're seeing more of a migration of the predator to the rural areas and to the trails where there aren't any cameras, because the camera's a witness. Dustin, with all that being said, I mean, is there anything else you want to talk about? Is there anything else you want to go over?
No, I think you covered it, but you made a really great point about, predators moving away from urban areas because, man, I can tell you, I've spent my life, outdoors doing active stuff. And I mean, the fact that we have, so much more population density than we did, like when you and I were kids, it's kind of actually pretty amazing that you have these urban trail centers. And this isn't the only place we're talking about. We've seen this in Austin too. Like, there's nothing, man. I mean, you're literally inside of a place where you've got eyes everywhere, except for a corridor of space that is isolated from recording, other than people's just personal devices. But man, it makes me wonder. You brought up the Apple Watch and why he didn't take that Apple Watch. I mean, he's certainly in the right age range to be technology aware, but we also know, looking at the Ring doorbell footage, or whatever company that was from, the doorbell footage in LA, when he was leaving, it looked like he had a device that was in his pocket or his hand or something, something that was illuminated as he was leaving. And it makes me wonder if that guy is tech savvy enough to know, man, that he dumped that phone as fast as he could get rid of it. And, when he commits this murder in Maryland, he's cutting ties with the technology. And like you said, he's gone from this highly urban area to this, it's an urban area, Bel Air, but he's on this trail system where, it's got a high degree of isolation, especially with, like you said, the foliage, the trees, and the tunnel. Who knows, but it makes a lot of sense to me that he wouldn't take it. So the implication, the way I see it, is that he's probably somewhat aware, at least, of that ability, because his watches are pretty phenomenal, and the stuff that they can record and everything else. So yeah,
And
we
it's
don't
not
know.
like he's drug addicted, that he needs it. He needs a quick couple bags. He's got to quick grab it and pawn it and pick up a few bags of heroin or coke or
Sure.
whatever, or meth. I mean, he's not that desperate. I see this
Right.
guy not being drug addicted at this point, being pretty clean living, and into exercise and working out.
Definitely. Yeah.
Dustin, is there anything else you want to end up with? Anything else you got to say? You're very knowledgeable. We love having you on. Before we say goodbye,
No, thanks, John. Thanks again for having me. We've covered some really, I think, and some important stuff here today. And, and just to reiterate, like what you were saying about trail systems, like, yeah, you can't take your just be situationally aware, whether you're male or female, but especially female, be situationally aware, just be mindful of your surroundings. And you don't have to be paranoid, and you don't have to not enjoy the outdoors. Just be situationally aware and kind of take some precautions as you're going out to enjoy your day or your evening or whatever you're doing.
Well said, and thank you so much. And thank you. We have a great audience here. I mean, very smart, intelligent audience. Please get back to us. Give us your thoughts. We always love your feedback. We'll get back to you. Okay, so we really appreciate your comments. I always forget about it in the beginning. If you like us, hit the like button. If you want to subscribe, subscribe. We always appreciate your subscriptions. We appreciate your comments. We can't thank you enough. Most importantly, keep your eyes open out there. Be aware. We live in a dangerous world. Take care. And until next time, God bless. Thank you.
Thanks, John.